The studio lights shimmered with their usual warm glow as the crowd burst into applause, the camera panning across the cheering audience before focusing in on Drew Barrymore seated in her iconic velvet chair, her familiar effervescence lighting up the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," she beamed, "tonight's guest is someone I've admired for years. He's a legend, an icon, and truly one of the kindest souls in Hollywood. Please welcome ... Keanu Reeves." The crowd roared louder as Keanu walked in with that unmistakable calm swagger, his signature black blazer hugging his frame, long hair tucked behind his ears, and that gentle, humble smile painted across his face. He bowed slightly, gave Drew a warm hug, and sat down to a symphony of applause and whistles. "Thank you," he said softly, waving to the crowd. Drew leaned forward with a sparkle in her eyes. "Keanu, you're like the internet's boyfriend. You know that, right?" Keanu chuckled modestly. "I've heard the term," he replied. Still getting used to it, they both laughed, and the banter began with tales of his dogs, filming stunts for John Wick, and an anecdote about getting lost in Tokyo one rainy night with a samurai-obsessed taxi driver who thought Keanu was actually trained in kendo. The audience loved every second. It was breezy, fun, nostalgic until it wasn't. "So Keanu," Drew said, the smile still on her face but her tone shifting just slightly, "you've been famously private all your life, almost elusive. But lately, people have noticed you opening up more, like with your partner, Alexandra. That's been beautiful to see." Keanu nodded, his smile faltering just a touch. "Yeah, ... We try to live quietly. It's important to me." Drew pressed on, gently but with more edge than before. "Do you ever worry, though, that by staying so quiet, you're letting others write your narrative? People love you, but they don't really know you." The question hung heavy for a second. Keanu tilted his head slightly, thoughtful. "I think I'd rather be misunderstood than misused," he said carefully. The audience gave a quiet, respectful laugh, but Drew didn't. "But what about accountability?" she asked, her tone more serious now. "There have been stories, people saying you ghost projects, or that you vanish after filming, never staying in touch with castmates or directors. Even Sandra Bullock said you disappeared on her. That did it." Keanu blinked slowly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I don't know what stories you're referring to," he said, calmly but not warmly. "I work hard. I care deeply about the people I collaborate with." "Sure," Drew said, voice rising a half step, "but don't you think being too silent starts looking like avoidance, or emotional unavailability even?" The studio had gone eerily still, the audience unsure whether they were witnessing real tension or expertly crafted TV drama. Keanu shifted in his seat. "With all due respect, Drew," he said, his voice firmer now, "this feels less like a conversation and more like an ambush." Drew leaned forward. "It's not an ambush, Keanu, it's a talk show. People want to hear you. Not just the memes, not just the mystery, the real you." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "And this is how you think you'll get him?" His voice was still calm, but the undercurrent had changed. He was no longer amused. The camera caught a quick shot of a man in the front row, looking around nervously. "I mean, Drew," he continued, gesturing slightly with one hand, "I came here thinking we'd talk about the work. The story's not interrogations about my emotional availability." Drew's smile had faded. "So you don't think people deserve to know if the version of you they idolize is real?" That question seemed to pierce something. Keanu leaned forward, both elbows on his knees, now, his eyes hard. "No, I don't owe the public every piece of myself. I've given decades to this industry. I've lost people I love. I've buried my grief in silence, and it's mine to carry, not content." For talk shows, a low gasp rippled through the crowd. Drew sat back slightly, blinking. "Keanu, I'm not trying to exploit your pain. I'm saying you're more than just an enigma. You're human. Let people in." Keanu shook his head, now visibly upset. Letting people in isn't the same as being put on trial. He stood slowly, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. "I agreed to an interview, not an inquisition." Drew held out a hand. Keanu, wait, but he was already turning, looking offstage toward a bewildered producer holding a clipboard. "I'm done," Keanu said, without raising his voice. Respect goes both ways. The camera scrambled to follow him as he walked off stage. The audience caught between gasping, clapping, and stunned silence. Drew sat frozen in her chair, lips parted as if unsure whether to call him back or wrap the segment. The music didn't play, the applause sign didn't light up, the moment just lingered. Then, with a quick cut to commercial, the screen faded out, and in that unresolved pause, the internet found its next viral obsession. The next morning, the internet was already on fire. Hashtags like hashtag Keanu walks out, hashtag Drew crossed the line, and hashtag talk show meltdown were trending across every major platform. Fans posted clips of the exact moment Keanu stood up, some cheering his composure, others debating whether Drew's questions were justified. TikToks exploded with lip-sync reenactments of his final words. Respect goes both ways. Reddit threads dissected every pause, every eyebrow twitch, every breath. arguing over who started it, who went too far, and whether it was a publicity stunt. Within hours, news outlets ran conflicting headlines. Keanu cracks under pressure. Drew ambushes beloved actor. The talk show moment that changed everything. Everyone had a take, and no one had the full picture. Meanwhile, the official Drew Barrymore Show YouTube channel quietly uploaded the full, unedited interview. No comments were disabled. No captions were altered. It was as raw as it had aired, complete with Keanu's graceful entrance, sharp departure, and the long, uncomfortable silence that followed. The views surged past 30 million in less than 24 hours. Backstage footage leaked next. Grainy handheld video from a crew member's phone. It showed Keanu walking briskly through the corridor, muttering something inaudible under his breath, his face tight with frustration. A producer approached, but Keanu waved him off without slowing down. Then came a voice from behind the camera, calling softly, "Keanu, can we talk?" He didn't stop. The clip ended there, and suddenly the narrative shifted again. Sympathy flooded in for both. Commenters began to say maybe this was just a case of two wounded artists colliding at the wrong time. Some pointed out that Drew had publicly struggled with boundaries in past interviews, especially when trying to make guests open up. Others defended her, saying she was doing what hosts are paid to do, get people to feel. But for Keanu fans, the line had been crossed. You don't poke a man who's built a wall out of pain just to get better ratings. One tweet read, retweeted over 600,000 times. By day 2. The Drew Barrymore Show released a brief statement. We deeply value our guests and the integrity of every conversation. We regret that yesterday's episode did not reflect the warmth and mutual respect we strive for. We have reached out to Mr. Reeves privately. It was professional, measured, but it didn't satisfy. Rumors swirled that Drew was heartbroken, that she had cried in her dressing room, that her producers were scrambling to manage damage control as sponsors began asking uncomfortable questions. The segment was gold for views, but poison for reputation. Drew had always been the darling of daytime, the bubbly safe space for stars to let down their guard. But now, critics accused her of crossing a line she didn't fully understand. A well-known radio host put it bluntly. She tried to strip armor from a man who's survived hell in silence. And he walked. On day 3, Drew returned to the air. The set was quieter. No band. No audience laughter track. She opened the show alone, seated, holding a mug that trembled slightly in her hands. I've been thinking a lot about what happened earlier this week, she began, her voice subdued but steady. Sometimes, in this job, you get caught up in trying to give the audience something real, and in doing so, you push someone too far. I think that's what I did with Keanu. She paused, visibly struggling. I love him. As a human, as an artist, I always have, and I asked him things I shouldn't have, at least not like that, not there. The apology was quiet. It didn't play to the cameras, it wasn't dressed in PR polish, and it left more questions than answers. I hope he knows that door is always open, she finished, then added, almost inaudibly, but I also understand if he never walks through it again. Keanu didn't respond. Not publicly, not immediately, and that silence became its own story. TMZ staked out his favorite coffee shop. Paparazzi camped outside his LA home, but he didn't emerge. Alexandra, his partner, was seen entering a bookstore, ignoring shouted questions about whether Keanu would forgive Drew. No comment. That was his message. And that silence did something even more powerful. It made people look inward. Think about what we ask of celebrities, what we demand from our icons, whether we mistake vulnerability for entertainment or silence for weakness. Podcast hosts debated emotional boundaries in interviews. YouTubers uploaded essays titled, The Ethics of Probing Pain, Lessons from Keanu versus Drew. One quiet clip resurfaced. Keanu, years ago, telling Stephen Colbert that grief never ends, it just changes shape, that it lives with you. That clip played on repeat, everywhere. Yet, beneath the noise, something stranger happened. The ratings for the Drew Barrymore Show went up, not because people were rooting for her, but because they wanted more rawness, more moments where things went off script, and that terrified her. She confessed to a friend off record that she felt like she had accidentally exposed a part of Hollywood no one wants to admit exists. The hunger to crack people open for a glimpse of something real. Keanu, meanwhile, returned to work. Weeks later, filming in Iceland, on his first day back, a fan yelled, "We're with you, John Wick," and he gave a small, knowing smile. But he still said nothing about the interview. That silence grew legendary. Memes declared it the most respectful mic drop in talk show history. And though both Drew and Keanu continued their lives, something had shifted permanently in how people saw them and in how talk shows handled vulnerability on air. Months passed. The internet, as it always does, moved on, but not entirely. The clip of Keanu walking off the Drew Barrymore Show became a modern artifact of media culture. Analyzed in film schools, ethics classes, and late-night monologues alike, it was played in contrast to other celebrity meltdowns and hailed as a masterclass in restraint. It was stitched into TikToks about boundaries. Some claimed it marked a turning point in talk show history the moment viewers collectively questioned what they were really watching. A slow reckoning began in the industry. Producers started holding internal meetings about emotional consent. Interview questions went through new layers of vetting. A-list guests began to request empathy clauses in their appearance contracts. And Drew, for a time, went quiet. She stopped doing press. She left Instagram. The show continued, but lighter, safer, curated almost to sterility. It was as though her own vulnerability had been sealed off after reaching for someone else's. But the weight of that moment never left her. You could see it in her eyes, in the way she sometimes paused mid-laugh, as if haunted by the ghost of a moment she couldn't undo. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Drew sat alone in the show's editing suite, combing through old footage for a retrospective episode. She came across the raw feed of Keanu's interview, not the broadcast cut, but the unfiltered, multi-angle recording. There was a brief, easily missed moment right before he left, just 2 seconds. She zoomed in, rewatched it. Right before Keanu turned to walk off stage, he looked at her. Not with anger, but something more complicated, disappointment maybe, hurt, or understanding. She watched it 5 times, 10, then shut the laptop and sat back, hands trembling. The image wouldn't leave her. That fragment of eye contact said everything no public statement ever could. That night, for the first time in months, she wrote a letter. Not an email, not a note, dictated to a publicist. A real, handwritten letter, in uneven script on thick paper. She didn't send it right away, but she carried it with her, folded into a book she kept in her bag, just in case. Meanwhile, Keanu continued his quiet streak, immersed in art films and a surprise voice role in a philosophical animated series. When asked in a rare magazine interview about Drew, he responded only with, "I believe people make mistakes and I believe we heal by letting others try again." It wasn't a direct answer, but it was the most he'd said on the matter, and fans latched onto it like scripture. For Drew, that sentence was both a relief and a new weight. She wrestled with it during therapy. She dreamed about it. She even shot a solo episode titled When Silence Speaks Louder, reflecting on fame, forgiveness, and the burden of turning moments into content. But she never mentioned Keanu by name, not once. Then, one rainy Thursday, an anonymous source leaked that Drew had extended a private invitation to Keanu to return to the show, not for a segment, not for ratings, but for coffee. Just a closed studio. No cameras, no crew, just a quiet space. No one knew if he responded. No one knew if he ever received the letter. But a month later, an unpublicized car was seen pulling into the studio's underground garage at dawn. Paparazzi, no entourage. A tall man in a long coat stepped out, holding a book. He entered through a side door, and that was it. No photos, no interviews. Just one blurry shot from a distant hallway camera, leaked weeks later, showing Drew and Keanu sitting across from each other at the edge of the stage, mugs in hand. Not talking, just sitting. 2 people, both weathered by years of being seen but not always understood. Sharing a silence that said more than any segment ever could. That image went viral again, not for the drama, but for the peace it implied. Fans speculated endlessly. Some said it was a staged PR stunt. Others said it was the closure Hollywood rarely gives. And some, perhaps the wisest, said it didn't matter. Because in the end, no one would ever know what words were exchanged. If any, the magic was in the mystery. In the fact that not every wound needed to be televised to be real. In an age of endless exposure, they had chosen the most radical path of all. Privacy. The Drew Barrymore show continued. Quieter, but deeper. Keanu kept making films. Still enigmatic. Still adored. And though they never did a reunion episode, fans always watched for it, secretly hoping. The clip of that first interview, Keanu's quiet fury, Drew's frozen expression, the absence of a neat resolution, remained one of the most watched TV moments of the decade. But it was that final, grainy image of the 2 of them in silence that stayed with people longer. Because sometimes, the greatest drama is what we never see. And sometimes, the truest apology is just showing up, even if you never press record.